and start the recording. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Bible Hangout. I am actually doing this here I'm in the YWCA for Glendale. And tonight is a candlelight vigil to take a stand against domestic violence. And one of the missions that the YWCA has, besides ending racism, is ending domestic violence. And so it is a super well attended event. I mean, they literally had to bring in other chairs and make room for the people that are here. It is a remarkable event, and I'm really, really excited and grateful to be a part of it. And so hence I'm sitting in the lobby. And what is your name? Asani? Yeah. Asani is, we have a live and in-person person that's taking the class with us tonight, but we're going to get to it. I'm excited for tonight. Also, thank you everyone, those of you that normally do the mastermind prayer call. Thank you for allowing me to preempt that so that I could be here and be a part of this event and support this effort to end domestic violence. So very grateful for that. All right, so we're going to pick up where we ended last week and talk about the prophet. So we talked about Isaiah, and now we're going to pick up with Micah, Hosea, and always mess that up. Amos, Hosea, and Micah. We're going to go in that order. That's out of order of when they actually prophesied, but that's the way that Reverend Mary had it in the book. So we'll go with the order that she had. All right. Play from current slide. Okay, great. Okay, so this is where we are so far. We're in the 8th century. So this is just reminding you of what we've talked about so far. And just so you know, I am on page 64. We're starting on page 64. So what we're doing, we're in the 8th century, and they are facing the Assyrian crisis. So Assyria is growing as a superpower, and they are threatening to overtake the area in Israel. Assyria is to the north, Egypt is to the south. And so these two superpowers are threats to Israel. Now, Isaiah actually comes a little bit later, but these are the prophets that prophesied during this time. This is right before and up to the fall of Israel, and then the subsequent fall of Judah. All right, and so there are 4 prophets that we are looking at. Last week we talked about Isaiah. Tonight we're going to talk about Micah, Amos, and Hosea. We're going to start with Amos first. In terms of where they prophesied, Isaiah and Micah prophesied in the southern kingdom, Judah, and Amos and Hosea prophesied in the northern kingdom, Israel. So they are coming with different messages. And remember, the prophet always arises with a message for the people. So yeah, let's just take a moment to just center ourselves and just be open. Be open to what the Spirit wants to do through us. And so we just bless tonight's class. We thank you for just a really informative and transformative experience. We thank you for making our facility work, even though we are not in our normal space. And I thank you for everything coming together in decency and in order. Amen. All right, let's go. So the prophet Amos. So if you go on the bottom of page 64, so the first thing is that you should know is that he's from the southern kingdom, but he prophesied in the north. So the equivalent is that he's coming from actually a city called Tekoa, Tekoa. He's coming from a city called Tekoa, and he is traveling to the north, and he's prophesying. And really what he's prophesying against is this all of the idolatry. Remember, when the kingdom split, they put the statues in the north and in the south for the people to worship. So he's prophesying against that. He is also prophesying against a lot of the social ills. So you have a lot of oppression of the poor. You have piousness that really has no substance behind it. People are basically grifting the poor, using scales that are unbalanced to cheat people who are poor and who make their living through what would be the equivalent that we call today sharecropping, and he is speaking against that. And so what he's saying is that it's not just the sin of the king that's going to bring an end to the nation, but it's also the sin of the people that you guys are. That you have an obligation to do right by people. So he was very much interested in taking care of people. That's a central part of his prophecy. He was technically he is the first of the prophet, the first of the prophets. All right. Now, so if you go to that first question, Amos came from a town in Judah called Tekoa, and he was a shepherd by trade. Shepherd by trade is what goes in that blank. He was also an agriculturalist, meaning that he was a dresser of sycamore trees, and he prophesied in Israel. I want to look for one thing. Hold on. He prophesied in Israel. Hold on. I'm pulling up the book because I want to make sure I share this with you guys. Hold on. Let's keep going. There we go. All right. Amos strongly denies that he is a professional prophet. That's it should be a professional prophet, not prophetic guild. Fix that right now. Give me 1 second. He prophesies that he is not a professional prophet. That's what should go there. So there were professional prophets that were employed essentially by the royal house, and they prophesied. Basically, they put a rubber stamp on everything that the king said do. And so he is that one of the ways that people discredited him is to say that he was a professional prophet, because essentially you are not coming with just a word from God, you're coming with a word that's got a dollar figure attached to it. And so it's one of the things that he says basically, no, that's not the case. So if you go to Amos chapter 7, and then verse 14, Amos chapter 7 and verse 14, one of the things he says, it says, then Amaziah sent orders to Amos, get out of here, you prophet, go on back to the land of Judah, because remember, he comes from the south, he's in the north prophesying, and earn your living by prophesying there. He basically, don't come trying to earn your living up here. Don't bother us with your prophecies here in Bethel. This is the king's sanctuary and the national place of worship. So he has basically gone to prophesy in the north. He is attacking or prophesying against the golden calf that's been raised in Bethel. And the response from the king is like, going back to Judah. And his response in verse 14 is, but Amos replied, I'm not a professional prophet, and I was never trained to be one. So the prophetic guild was literally like a guild of professional prophets. So even though he does not belong to a prophetic guild, he is directly called by God to prophesy. He says, I'm just a shepherd and I take care of sycamore fig trees. But the Lord called me away from my flock and told me, go and prophesy to my people in Israel. And then he goes on and gives an oracle to the people there. So one of the ways that he was attacked by his critics was the implication that he was basically being paid to give the message that he was giving, and he strongly denies it. He spared no words in condemning the royalty and aristocracy of Israel, who abused the privilege of wealth and even used their authority to get richer at the expense of the poor. So this was a recurring theme where the royal house would basically abuse the poor, would cheat them out of their money, would ignore conditions that basically made it hard for them to make a living, and did nothing to protect the people. So this is what he says in chapter 4. If you go to Amos chapter 4, he says, "Listen to me, you fat cows living in Samaria, you women who oppress the poor and crush the needy, and who are always calling to your husbands, 'Bring us another drink.' The sovereign Lord has sworn this by his holiness. The time will come when you will be led away with hooks in your noses. Every last one of you will be dragged away like a fish on a hook. You will be led out through the ruins of the wall. You will be thrown from your fortresses, says the Lord." And then he speaks of the idolatry. "Go ahead and offer sacrifices to the idols. Keep on disobeying at Gilgal. Offer sacrifices each morning." Basically, keep on doing what you're doing. And essentially, he's speaking against this act that they're doing, which is to take advantage. They're getting rich off of the fact that they can take advantage of people. They can set the prices, they can control the markets, and they're doing it at the expense of the poor. In Amos's analysis, Israel was just going through the motions of worshiping God and observing proper rituals, thinking that this was the sum total of their obligation to God. And so this is what he's saying here. He's like, I sent I'm still reading in chapter 4. That basically says, "Go ahead and offer sacrifices to the idols at Bethel. Keep on disobeying at Gilgal. Offer sacrifices each morning and bring your tithes every 3 days. Present your bread made with yeast as an offering of thanksgiving. Then give your extra voluntary offering so you can brag about it everywhere. This is the kind of thing you Israelites love to do." So he's speaking against the false piety that they have, and saying that this is, you're just going through the motions. You don't really believe in God, and you don't really see God as your sustenance. Amos criticized formal religion. Oh, did I skip one? No, I didn't. Amos criticized formal religion when people used it to make themselves right with God in the absence of personal and corporate morality. So he felt that all of Israel was plagued with a superficial kind of piety. And so for him, serving Yahweh included caring for others. And so he denounces the wealthy, the powerful, and the way that they treat the poor. And so there are a couple of things here from his book, his notes that I have for you. The oracles against the people, these were common literary forms that you will see with other prophets. The other thing to know about prophets is that these are anthologies or compilations of teachings or writings or sayings. It should not be taken as if they were uttered in the order that they were given, or that they were sequential, meaning like one behind the other, that it's a collection of work. And you see that because there's always, there's him writing in the first person, but then there's also words about him, Amos, in the third person, which suggests that there was some editor involved with compiling the material after his lifetime, or maybe editing possibly the material after his lifetime. The writer sees the fall of the northern kingdom as a fulfillment of Amos's words, because he's warning against the fall. And so the Assyrians, in the point of view of the writer, or at least of the editor, who pull this together, is that the Assyrians were instruments of God's just punishment. So for the way that Israel behaved, for the way that they didn't honor their relationship with God, that the fall of Israel to Assyria was just punishment. Um, Amos's message was that sin would be punished by God, and it would be punished on a national level, and the nation would fall. And so, again, the worst sin is idolatry, meaning that you put some other God before God. But what Amos does, and what you see with the prophets, is that they are beginning to tie. So sin was never individual. Let me say that. Sin was never individual. It was always something that was collective. So the people sinned, and the people were punished collectively. But what you start to see with the prophets is this emergence of this idea of individual sin, and it having a collective uh, result or a collective effect on the entire nation. Modern day would be considering like what's happening right now with these kids in cages, and you hear people saying, we're all gonna have to pay for this. We're all gonna have to basically suffer for this because it's this happened on our watch, and so we're impacted by that, and we're responsible for that. And so that's just to give you an outline of how Amos thought. But an outline of the book of Amos. So the book of Amos is a very fatalistic book. His message was that sin would be punished by God, and it would be punished on a national level, and the nation would fall. And so for the first chapter, chapters 1 through 2, is kind of the title of the book and like the label. From chapters 1, 3 to 2, you get the oracles against the foreign nations. And then chapters 2 to 4-ish, you get the judgment oracles that are against injustice and idolatry. And then chapter 5, you get this call to return to God. In fact, I'll go to that so you can hear what that sounds like. And it's like this call to repentance. And he says, listen, you people of Israel, listen to this funeral song I am singing. The virgin Israel has fallen, never to rise again. She lies abandoned on the ground with no one to hold her up. The sovereign Lord says, when a city sends 1,000 men to battle, only 100 will return. When a town sends 100, only 10 will come back alive. Now this is what the Lord says to the family of Israel. Come back to me and live. Don't worship at the pagan altars of Bethel. Don't go to the shrines at Gilgal or Beersheba. For the people of Gilgal will be dragged off into exile, and the people of Bethel will be reduced to nothing. Come back to the Lord and live. Otherwise, he will roar through Israel like a fire, devouring you completely. Your gods in Bethel won't be able to quench the flames. You twist justice, making it a bitter pill for the oppressed. You treat the righteous like dirt. It is the Lord who created the stars, the Pleiades and Orion. He turns darkness into morning and day into night. He draws up water from the oceans and pours it down as rain on the land. The Lord is his name. With blinding speed and power, he destroys the strong, crushing all their defenses. And so it is this call, come back to the Lord and live. Basically, what you've been calling life is not life. Come back, change your minds. So this is the call to return to God. And then in chapters 5 and 6, you get, from there forward, you get more judgment oracles against injustice and idolatry. In chapters 7 through 9, you get this vision of judgment. And then if you go to chapter 9 at the very end, you get this oracle of hope. And it's so out of character for Amos's book, because his book is extremely fatalistic, meaning that like it's over, you guys have basically effed up and it's going down. And so this oracle of hope that comes at the end, verses 7 through 15, is so out of character for him that scholars actually believe that it was added later by either an editor or a disciple who wanted to kind of put a softer touch on Amos, because you don't get anything like it in the rest of the book. If you look at verses 7 through 15, this is what it says. It says, "Are you Israelites more important to me than the Ethiopians?" asked the Lord. "I brought Israel out of Egypt, but I also brought the Philistines from Crete and led the Arameans out of Kir. I, the sovereign Lord, am watching this sinful nation of Israel. I will destroy it from the face of the earth, but I will never completely destroy the family of Israel, says the Lord. For I will give the command and will shake Israel along with the other nations as grain is shaken in a sieve. Yet not one true kernel will be lost, but all the sinners will die by the sword, all those who say nothing bad will happen to us. In that day, I will restore the fallen house of David. I will repair its damaged walls. From the ruins, I will rebuild it and restore its former glory. And Israel will possess what is left of Edom and all the nations I have called to be mine. The Lord has spoken, and he will do these things. The time will come, says the Lord, when the grain and grapes will grow faster than they can be harvested. Then the terraced vineyards on the hills of Israel will drip with sweet wine. I will bring my exiled people of Israel back from distant lands, and they will rebuild their ruined cities and live in them again. They will plant vineyards and gardens. They will eat their crops and drink their wine. I will firmly plant them there in their own land. They will never again be uprooted from the land I have given them, says the Lord your God. So that passage I just read to you, verses 7 through 15, it's so out of character for the rest of the book that it's like, who like who wrote this? Like there's nothing else like it. There's no, like his earlier message is so without hope. And then it's like he does this about face at the end of the book that basically says, it's like, I was kidding. I mean, I'm gonna put you through some hard times, but I'm gonna fix it in the end. And so scholars don't think that he wrote that. They think that came from somebody else, another writer at a later time, either an editor, possibly a follower of Amos. So anyway, let me know if there are any questions that you have on this. And everybody make sure you got everything that's in the blanks as we go. Any questions? All right. Then let's move on to Hosea. So Hosea comes from the northern kingdom, and he prophesied in the north, and he prophesied in the time of Jeroboam II. So just to back up and make sure you're following the history, the northern tribe breaks off, and they're led by Jeroboam. So this is the time that Hosea is prophesying, is during the time that Jeroboam's son, or Jeroboam II, is king of Israel, or king of the north. So Hosea was a native of the northern kingdom. He was a native of the northern kingdom who prophesied there. So he was born in the north, and he prophesied in the north. Born in the north and prophesied in the north. Now, what's interesting about him is that he is the first prophet to use his family house, and in particular his children, to make a theopolitical prophetic point. A theopolitical prophetic point. So this is what happens. It says, when the Lord first began speaking to Israel through Hosea, he said to him, "Go and marry a prostitute, so that some of her children will be conceived in prostitution. This will illustrate how Israel has acted like a prostitute by turning against the Lord and worshiping other gods." So it like he uses his life as a way to as an example of, to explain to the people their relationship with God. And one of the things that you'll see, it's a continual thing that comes up, that Israel is always treated as feminine and as the bride of God. This idea of the nation being married to God. Um, there are I'm in the process now. I actually just did a voiceover for the book of Ezekiel. I'm part of a team that is, or I've been hired, I should say. I'm not part of a team, but I'm part of a team of people that have been hired to give voice to the Old and the New Testament. And the book that I was given to read is Ezekiel. And you'll see when we get to Ezekiel, it's a really interesting text because there's all this language, and it's extreme language, like, in fact, let me see if I can find any of it to share with you, because it's amazing, like some of the things that are there. I'm trying to see if I can find something really quickly to share with you. Because all the prophets come, they all speak of doom and gloom, but basically they're saying that, look, the behavior that you have given is like you're cheating on God. Um, it's a judgment against false prophets. Okay. Okay, this is it. So I'm reading from Ezekiel chapter 16. It says, "Then another message came to me from the Lord. Son of man, confront Jerusalem with her detestable sins. Give her this message from the sovereign Lord. You are nothing but a Canaanite. Your father was an Amorite and your mother a Hittite. On the day you were born, no one cared about you. Your umbilical cord was not cut, and you were never washed, rubbed with salt, wrapped in cloth. No one had the slightest interest in you. No one pitied you or cared for you. On the day you were born, you were unwanted, dumped in a field, and left to die. But I came by," and this is Ezekiel saying that God is telling him this about Jerusalem or Judah. "But I came by and saw you there, helplessly kicking about in your own blood. As you lay there, I said, 'Live,' and I helped you to thrive like a plant in the field. You grew up and became a beautiful jewel. Your breasts became full and your body hair grew, but you were still naked. And when I passed by again, I saw that you were old enough for love. So I wrapped my cloak around you to cover your nakedness and declared my marriage vow." This is, again, in the words of Ezekiel, but describing the relationship between God and Israel. It is this idea of Israel being God's bride. And this theme you see repeating here with the prophets. I made a covenant with you, says the sovereign Lord, and you became mine. Then I bathed you and washed off your blood, and I rubbed fragrant oils into your skin. I gave you expensive clothing of fine linen and silk, beautifully embroidered, and sandals made of fine goatskin leather. And so it goes on from there. It's very, I don't want to say erotic quite, but it's something. It's interesting language. I will say that. So then with Hosea, what he comes and he is demonstrating this relationship, like he uses his family life to demonstrate the relationship between Israel and God, and as a way to say, Israel, this is how you're behaving with God. Let me give you this living example so you can see how bad it is. And so under God's instruction, he marries a prostitute. And so it says that Hosea in Hosea chapter 1, verse 3. So Hosea married Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim. She became pregnant and gave Hosea a son. And the Lord said, name the child Jezreel, for I am about to punish King Jehu's dynasty to avenge the murders he committed at Jezreel. In fact, I will bring an end to Israel's independence. I will break its military power in the Jezreel Valley. Soon Gomer became pregnant again and gave birth to a daughter. And the Lord said to Hosea, name your daughter Lo-Ruhamah, which means not loved, for I will no longer show love to the people of Israel or forgive them. And then it says, and after Gomer had weaned Lo-Ruhamah, she again became pregnant and gave birth to a second son. And the Lord said, name him Lo-Ami, meaning not my people, for Israel is not my people and I am not their God. And he goes on. But essentially what he has done is he has used his children to make a theopolitical prophetic point. And so he names his children not loved, not my people. And I forgot what the first one was, Jezreel. I forgot the name, the meaning of the name Jezreel, but essentially his children, at least the first three, the ones that are named, they're named that way because he's saying that this demonstrates how God feels about Israel, that I don't love you and you're not my people anymore. And if you remember, this is an ongoing thing. This is one of the things that enables Israel to keep the idea of God as their God, as opposed to picking up the gods of the people who defeat them, which was the practice of the day. That when you were defeated by a people, you adopted their God. Hosea's marriage to Gomer was a mirror of Yahweh's experience with Israel. Marriage was equated with the covenant God had made with Israel in the wilderness. So again, I read to you previously from Ezekiel, and that gives probably the most graphic language. I mean, it almost sounds X-rated in terms of, your breasts were full and, I covered you and you were mine and I came into you. And it's like, good Lord. But again, this was the relationship. It was understood to be a marriage that God was protected Israel the way that a husband would protect a wife. And so, that theme carries through. I know you're probably familiar with language in the New Testament that also is very much along those lines. Although he preaches the same message of judgment as Amos, Hosea brings out the compassion of Yahweh and God's sorrow at having to punish Israel. Now, this I thought was interesting because it was, hold on. I want to read this because I thought it was so interesting. So this is what he said. It's this idea that God doesn't want to. So I'm reading from Hosea chapter 7, if you want to read along with me. Hosea chapter 7. And this is God speaking through the prophet Hosea. I want to heal Israel, but its sins are too great. Samaria is filled with lies. Thieves are on the Thieves are on the inside and bandits are on the outside. Its people don't realize that I am watching them. Their sinful deeds are all around them, and I see them all. The people entertain the king with their wickedness, and the princes laugh at their lies. They are all adulterers, always aflame with lust. They are like an oven that is kept hot while the baker is kneading the dough. On royal holidays, the princes get drunk with wine, carousing with those who mock them. Their hearts are like an oven blazing with intrigue. Their plot smolders through the night, and in the morning breaks out like a raging fire. I'm trying to get I'm jumping down to verse 13. I wanted to redeem them, but they have told lies about me. They do not cry out to me with sincere hearts. Instead, they sit on their couches and wail. They cut themselves, begging foreign gods for grain and new wine, and they turn away from me. I trained them and made them strong, yet now they plot evil against me. They look everywhere except to the Most High. They are useless as a crooked bow. Their leaders will be killed by their enemies because of their insolence towards me. Then the people of Egypt will laugh at them. I was looking. I'm looking for one other piece I wanted to share with you. So this is, I'm reading from chapter 11. So Hosea chapter 11. And this is again, God talking about how much through the prophet Hosea, talking about how much he loves Israel. When Israel was a child, I loved him and I called my son out of Egypt. But the more I called to him, the farther he moved from me, offering sacrifices to the images of Baal and burning incense to idols. I myself taught Israel how to walk, leading him along by the hand. But he doesn't know or even care that it was I who took care of him. I led Israel along with ropes of kindness and love. I lifted the yoke from his neck, and I myself stooped to feed him. But since my people refuse to return to me, they will return to Egypt and will be forced to serve Assyria. War will swirl through their cities. Their enemies will crash through their gates. They will destroy them, for my people are determined to desert me. And then it goes on to verse 8. I mean, this sounds like a Shakespearean sonnet. Listen to this. Oh, how can I give you up, Israel? How can I let you go? How can I destroy you like Admah or demolish you like Zeboam? My heart is torn within me, and my compassion overflows. No, I will not unleash my fierce anger. I will not completely destroy Israel, for I am God and not a mere mortal. I am the Holy One living among you, and I will not come to destroy. For someday the people will follow me. I, the Lord, will roar like a lion. And when I roar, my people will return trembling from the west. Like a flock of birds, they will come from Egypt. Trembling like doves, they will return from Syria, and I will bring them home again. And it's like this, essentially what comes out in Hosea is this, that Yahweh is just sorrowful at having to execute judgment. That I want to love Israel. I don't want to let Israel go, and but it hurts me, but I gotta do this. It makes me think of when you used to get a spanking from your parents, like, this is gonna hurt me more than it hurts you. Well, that's one of these moments. It's gonna hurt me more than it hurts you. But again, I'm trying to give you the flavor of what these prophets are bringing, and they're each bringing a different flavor. Again, Amos was just fatalistic, like, y'all have messed up, and basically ain't no hope for you. A later editor probably comes along, probably not Amos, and says, I'm not going to destroy everybody. But Hosea is just, it's this anger mixed with compassion, this anger mixed with a deep sadness that I have to follow through on the law. I have to follow through on executing judgment. Hosea in his writing brings out three special covenant qualities, special covenant qualities. Hosea in his writing brings out three special covenant qualities. And so the first one is fidelity. And I think you've seen that in what I've read to you, that there is this loyalty that God has to Israel. Even when Israel deserts God, God doesn't desert Israel. There's this unfailing fidelity that God has. Then there's the loving compassion, which I just read to you, which really, I mean, if you didn't know that was from the Bible, you could mistake it from being from Shakespeare. That it's as powerful as any love sonnet that Shakespeare wrote, from Romeo to Juliet or Juliet to Romeo, or any of the other love sonnets that he wrote. And then there is this knowledge of God that I didn't get to any of those passages, but this knowledge of God that shows up in the writing. So in his writing, these are the three special covenant qualities that Israel, that he brings out. I should say this is the knowledge of God, meaning that God did all these things for us, that the reason that we're even able to do what we do is because of God. And let me know if you have any questions. Y'all are super quiet tonight, so I'm assuming that this is landing and that you can hear me and that this is making sense. Okay. So an outline of the book of Hosea. I'm at the bottom of 66. So the book of Hosea actually is the most difficult of the prophetic books because the Hebrew is not very intelligible. But at this point, the Assyrians are actually wiping out a number of the smaller states in the ancient Near East in the middle of the 8th century. So with Amos, it's a relative time of peace. There really isn't a lot that has gone on at the time that Amos is prophesying. But once Hosea comes on the picture, and remember, we did Isaiah first, but Isaiah comes after Hosea. So a better order would be Amos, Hosea, Micah, and then Isaiah. But Reverend Mary had the book organized in a different order. But these four go together because they're all in the 8th century. So at this point, what's happening is, again, to put it in modern day context, it would be kind of looking at what's happening. I mean, again, because we're in a country like in Assyria, so we are the superpower of our day. So, but it would be like, the decisions that our country is making where we're encroaching on the territory of other countries and coming in and trying to attack them and take over either their economies or to make them dependent on us in some way. And so what's happening is that as the 8th century progresses, that Assyria is taking out smaller states. I think Aram falls first. The home of the Arameans falls first, and there are other areas that they are taking out and gaining control of as they make their way toward Israel. So the book of the book of Hosea, the book of Hosea. So the first three chapters, chapters 1, 2, and 3, is basically a description of the different ways of the broken marriage between God and his people. It's a description in different ways of the broken marriage between God and his people. So remember, Hosea is using his marriage to Gomer as a metaphor, as a living metaphor for what has happened what has happened in the relationship between God and Israel. Then chapters 4 through 13, you get actual oracles that are delivered by Hosea during his ministry. So it's oracles against foreign nations, it's oracles against the rich, it's oracles against the religious right, if you will. These are the oracles, and these are pronouncements from God about behaviors that he is displeased with. And then in chapter 14, you get this closing vision of hope after judgment, this closing vision of hope after judgment. It is this hope, God never gives up hope. And this is what it says: return, O Israel, to the Lord your God, for your sins have brought you down. Bring your confessions and return to the Lord. Say to him, forgive all our sins and graciously receive us, so that we may offer you our praises. Assyria cannot save us, nor can our war horses. Never again will we say to the idols we have made, you are our gods. No, in you alone do the orphans find mercy. The Lord says, then I will heal you of your faithlessness. My love will know no bounds, for my anger will be gone forever. I will be to Israel like a refreshing dew from heaven. Israel will blossom like the lily. It will send roots deep into the soil like cedars in Lebanon. Its branches will spread out like beautiful olive trees, as fragrant as the cedars of Lebanon. My people will again live under my shade. They will flourish like grain and blossom like grapevines. They will be as fragrant as the wines of Lebanon. O Israel, stay away from idols. I am the one who answers your prayers and cares for you. I am like a tree that is always green. All your fruit comes from me. Let those who are wise understand these things. Let those with discernment listen carefully. The paths of the Lord are true and right, and righteous people live by walking in them. But in those paths, sinners stumble and fall. It's just come back. You can think of chapter 14 as this call to action. Come back to God. Give yourself back to submit yourself, Israel, back to your husband, God. If Assyria was going to conquer Israel, Hosea felt that it was God's just punishment. To fight against it was simply another kind of rejection of God, another rejection of his plans and purpose. It demonstrated a lack of trust or faith in the power of God. So he never counsels them to take a stand against Assyria or to try to protect Judah or any of that. His thing is that, listen, this thing is going to happen. This is happening. You can see this superpower is coming in and they are basically going to take over. So we need to just kind of make peace with this and recognize that this is part of God's plan, that we can trust that things are going to work out with, even though it looks really bad right now. Any questions on Hosea? Any feedback on Hosea? Now listen, y'all gonna have to say something. So just so I know you're there, give me something, just a so that I know I'm not just talking to myself. I want to know that is this landing? Is this making sense? Is this sticking? Where are we at? Joseph, explain the oracles again. So what the oracles are they are pronouncements from God through the prophet of how God feels about Israel. And they are pronouncements of what God finds problematic in the behavior. So let's see if I can find one simply. So the oracles. So I'm reading from Hosea chapter 10. So this is one of the oracles. Okay. Actually, let me go to chapter 9. So if you just go to chapter 9, it says, Hosea chapter 9. Malayla says God's fidelity to Israel is an awe moment. It is. O people of Israel, I'm reading from chapter 9, Hosea chapter 9. O people of Israel, do not rejoice as other nations do, for you have been unfaithful to your God, hiring yourselves out like prostitutes, worshiping other gods on every threshing floor. So now your harvest will be too small to feed you. There will be no grapes for making new wine. You may no longer stay here in the Lord's land. Instead, you will return to Egypt, and in Assyria you will eat food that is ceremonially unclean. There you will make no offerings of wine to the Lord. None of your sacrifices there will please him. They will be unclean, like food touched by a person in mourning. All who present such sacrifices will be defiled. They may eat this food themselves, but they may not offer it to the Lord. What then will you do on festival days? How will you observe the Lord's festivals? Even if you escape destruction from Assyria, Egypt will conquer you and Memphis will bury you. Nettles will take over your treasures of silver. Thistles will invade your ruined homes. And so essentially what's happening is that the prophets are speaking out, are speaking out against the behavior. Okay, guys. DJ says, we hear you, so much to take in. And Andrea says, okay, I'm just going to say it. I really don't like the punishment and unforgiveness themes in the Old Testament. I just don't like it as much as I like the love and oneness of the New Testament and the metaphysical studies we've done before. I tune in anyway because I feel like I should. It's like eating my vegetables. I'm looking forward to getting back to dessert. And Joe says, yes. Yes, definitely. And keep in mind, so a good part of this is also how we've been given these stories. We've been giving these stories as if they are literal, as if we can't question them. Uh, I am 100% not offended, Andrea. She said, I'm glad you're not offended, Rev. You know I love you. But this is, so what fascinates me about this is that this has been taught as if this is, what's the word? That this is how God would behave, but this is a concept of God. You got to get that this is a concept of God. This is how the people saw God. And there are a multiplicity of concepts of God in the Bible. And unfortunately, how many of us have been given our concept of God, we've been given it in a way where we've been told that we can't question it. And that, of course, creates all kinds of problems. And I say question everything. So, all right, let's jump on to Micah because I want to finish this tonight. Next week, I will be in Jamaica, and I'll be on a cruise ship as part of the women's retreat for Universal Truth Center in Miami. And I don't know what reception will be like, so we won't do class next week because I can't guarantee that I'll actually have reception. And also I may be in session as well, teaching at that time. So the prophet Micah comes from the southern kingdom and he prophesied in the south. He seems to be a rural prophet who spoke for the poor farmers. So each prophet, they arise, and the oracles are, the best way I can describe it is that if you take a listen to, well, I shared an article today on my page, on my Facebook page. This woman, Karen, I'm blanking on her name, but she's a minister, and she spoke out about what she called cheap grace, and the idea of whites demanding absolution from the atrocities that are committed in the name of racism and oppression. And so that's a prophet. It's like the person arises to speak out against what they see happening in their world. And so you have someone like a Carlton Pearson, that's somebody I know that you guys are aware of, who comes out and speaks out against what's happening, and he is continually calling to task the religious right that he was a part of for many years. VJ says, see, that helps me as this being a concept of God, as God is seen by different people. Yes, that's exactly what it is. But I want you to get what the prophet is doing, that you have, and that is no different from what people are doing today, which is that you have people rising up, speaking against the atrocities that they witness today. Okay. All right. So Micah was from a rural town in Judah called Moresheth. He was an anti-establishment prophet who was respected by the king. He was an anti-establishment prophet who was respected by the king. Micah prophesied in the small villages, tribal territories, and border cities. His charges are leveled against the landlords who take advantage of the poor. His charges are against the landlords who take advantage of the poor. He condemns leaders in the capital cities of Jerusalem and Samaria Remember, Jerusalem is the capital of the south, Samaria of Judah, and Samaria is the capital of Israel. And he condemns the leaders in the capital cities of Jerusalem and Samaria for using their positions to take advantage of others. So whereas all the prophets were speaking out against these social ills, these things that were going on. So part of what happens when Solomon goes on the building spree and is that it ends up creating these urban areas, and it ends up creating classes. So you have people that are wealthy or wealthier, the people that are in the poor areas. And so you have all these areas that are built up, but then you got all these agricultural. Whereas before, everybody was a little bit on even footing before Solomon went on these building sprees. So the cities, the city areas, what we would call the big cities, have developed. The rural areas have not developed as much, and it's created a class system. No different than what we're seeing in the US even today, with how areas like New York, LA, Chicago, Houston, other areas are built up, or California, that would be just those cities, but different states are built up. And then you have these rural areas, if you go some places down south, that are like you in the backwoods. And it's like, do y'all even know that it's 2019? Places where you don't even have good cell phone reception. And so there were these hierarchies, and what Micah is rising up, and he's speaking against the positions, that the leaders who were using their positions to take advantage of the people that were the agriculturalists who couldn't compete with what was going on in the cities. He calls for the banishment of all idols. So a lot of times, a lot of it was that, you have taken, you're starting to worship these other gods. He calls for the banishment of all idols and the cessation of false worship in the land, which will lead to prosperity and peace. He calls for the banishment of all idols and the cessation of false worship in the land, which will lead to prosperity and peace. He gives a one-line summary of the whole law, which is to do right, love goodness, and walk humbly before God. Do right, love goodness, and walk humbly before God. Thank you. Micah wrestled with the nature of prophecy and condemned prophets who worked for wages. He condemned prophets who worked for wages. The prophets that he criticizes are the producers of the Zion theology. And this theology is based on the belief in the divine election of the nation, the Davidic dynasty, and the city of Jerusalem. So he criticizes these prophets that produce this Zion theology. The Zion theology believed that God was never going to act against the line of David, that Jerusalem would never fall. And so you get almost kind of this contrast between, say, Micah and Isaiah, that Micah didn't believe that. He believed that you absolutely could fall. And Isaiah felt like God would never take Israel down. And so Micah is very critical of the Davidic dynasty. He ridicules the idea of the inviolability of Zion. He ridicules the belief that the presence of the sanctuary in Jerusalem somehow protects the city from harm. And so just as an outline, the first 3 chapters are oracles against Samaria and Judah. And then chapters 4 and 5 are oracles of hope and restoration. Chapters 6 and 7 is a legal trial. So he actually creates this, what they call a RIV, R-I-V, this legal trial against Israel for its sins. And it's almost like the pronouncement is given in the form of a trial, like God took Israel to trial. And then the remainder of the end of chapter 7 is a vision of God's victory over Israel's enemy. And so Micah stands as a stark contrast to Isaiah, whose trust and has confidence that God will never allow his holy city to be destroyed. It should be allow, not all. Allow his holy city to be destroyed, his sanctuary to be destroyed. Structurally, the book of Micah alternates 3 prophecies of doom and 3 prophecies of restoration or hope. And so that is the end of the prophets. Any questions? anything that's not clear from this? I want to make sure to get what we're looking at. So at this point, Israel is about to fall. We're coming into where Assyria is growing as a threat, and then they end up toppling Israel, and basically taking those 10 tribes and removing them and relocating them somewhere else. And then you have Judah, which stands for another 150 to 200 years. But any questions on that? And these are the prophets who we've looked at: Isaiah, Micah, Hosea, and Amos. These were the 4 prophets that prophesied during the time of the Assyrian crisis, during the time that this superpower is coming in, threatening Israel, and then comes right to the door of Judah. They don't actually end up conquering Judah because they have their own internal struggles and they end up imploding. But then Babylon comes in and conquers Judah. So the so we won't meet next week, but then on the 17th we'll meet, and we will start with the 7th century prophets. And those are the ones that prophesied during the Babylonian crisis. So again, Israel, and at this point, Israel is no more. All we have left is Jerusalem, or Judah, and Judah is now facing a threat from the Babylonians. And so we'll see how that shakes out. All right. Thank you guys for tonight. This has been awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, thank you. I'm just reading the comments. Wonderful. You guys have a good night, and I will see you guys in 2 weeks. Thank you. Love you guys. Good night.